Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's online public meeting with North Yorkshire Police, where we will be looking at the campaign around the Winter of Action. But before that, we will also be looking at the regular performance dashboards. And just to introduce people to everyone who is on the call, we have the Chief Constable, Tim Forber, we've got the Assistant Chief Constable, Ben Mosley, Chief Inspector, David Hunter, who's going to take us through that presentation on the Winter of Action. And then from the Combined Authority and the Directorate for Policing, Fire and Crime, Tamara Stevens, Amanda Wilkinson and Mark Ayres, and the people on the call who don't have their cameras on are our support staff who are making sure that this meeting is broadcast and to action anything that comes up during the course of the meeting. I think we've got apologies from the Deputy Chief Constable, is that right?
That's right, he's on leave today.
Great. In which case we will crack on. So sorry, I haven't introduced myself. I'm Jo Coles. I'm the Deputy Mayor for Policing, Fire and Crime for York and North Yorkshire, and it is my role to hold the police service and the Chief Constable to account for the work that they're doing to keep everyone safe in our region. But we will start then, I think, with the performance pack. So if it's possible to put the slides up on the screen. Brilliant. And I think the Chief Constable is going to take us through these slides.
I am. So if we could have the first slide, please. Okay, so the first slide relates to 999 calls. You can see that throughout the course of December, we took 8,634 calls. You can see in the table on the left-hand side our performance throughout the course of the year. You can see that consistently we've hit over 90%, and in December we got to 95.53% of our 999 calls within our SLA, and you can see that there's an estimated average answer time of 2 seconds. So I think this reflects the really hard work that's been undertaken by the control room over the last year. Despite, particularly throughout the summer months, a real significant rise in demand for the force, we've consistently got our call handling of emergencies that it's continued to improve. There is a note on the side there of the maximum waiting time for one particular call. We have investigated that call, and it appears to be some sort of alternated number that kept calling back. So it is not someone waiting on the line for an excessive period of time. And by and large, I think you find that our 999 performance ranks up there with the best forces in the country.
Fantastic, yeah. And to be honest, that is a very, very impressive performance from the force and presumably from all of the staff in the force control room, who are the ones who answer those calls. Just to pass on my thanks to them for everything that they're doing to make sure that anyone who is calling 999 gets such a swift response. I don't think there is anything I need to pick up from that slide, so I think we can probably move straight on to the 101 calls.
So you see our 101 chart on there, and you can see the pattern of calls. What you can see there in December is that we got to 87.84% of calls within our SLA. This is a challenge for us, 101 calls. Obviously, you can see on the slide, call volumes on 101 have increased 26% this year, which would be a challenge for any organisation. And whilst you can continue to try and drive as much traffic as you can online, the simple fact of the matter is in policing is that people generally want to speak to someone. So that remains a challenge for us. But what you can see is that our average answer time continues to fall. It's a further 1 minute 26 seconds reduction in 2025 against the same period in 2024, despite that increase in calls. It's something that we continue to work at. It's a really important area of business for us. But I think what you can see there is a continuing improvement in terms of our performance across the course of the year, and certainly in terms of our performance last year.
Yeah, great. Thank you. A couple of questions just on that one. one, what or whether there are any plans within the control room to deal with what we know is, I think, a regular summer spike in demand. So just whether there's anything that the force is thinking about in terms of those summer months when the demand goes up, and whether or not, given that annual increase in volume, what else the force is looking at to manage that increase in demand, because it's increase in demand, I think, on the phones, but also via the other ways in which people can contact the force for non-emergency reasons. So just really a bit more information about what else is going on.
I think my observations, and I've said this publicly before, one of my observations is I mean, this summer 2026 will be my third summer in North Yorkshire Police, and our spike in demand here is certainly greater. It feels greater than anything I've experienced in any other police force that I've worked in. That's unsurprising given the dependence, the factor of tourism in North Yorkshire. So in terms of, if I take it outside of the control room to start off with, in terms of that, it's really important now when we're in a period of lower demand that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that our workloads are as low as possible, that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we build capacity in for when seasonally we know that we'll get a spike. As regards to the control room, we have software that gives us a very keen understanding in terms of what our expected call volumes are, an upper and lower parameter, and we make sure that we resource the control room according to that. So we've got sufficient call handlers on. Over the course of the year, what we will continue to do is work on our online offer to make sure that we publicise our ability to contact the police via live chat, and continue to work on where we know we're getting repeat demand. So making sure that we are continuing to update victims of crime, as much as one source of calls into the control room is people ringing for an update. The more efficient we are at updating victims of crime, the lower we get our crime volumes down, the less that people will call us. So there's a variety of different things going on to make sure that we continue to provide the service that we want, that we aspire to the public. But it is a fact. It is a fact in North Yorkshire. You simply cannot resource permanently to the max of the summer. It's about making sure that we've got a flexible resource that we can flex in and out to manage vagaries in demand.
Yeah, I mean, it's 40 million visitors that we have in the region during the course of the year. That's going to create some demand, isn't it?
Okay, that was no doubt.
Yeah, that's fine. In which case, let's move on. It is something we keep an eye on in every meeting, so we'll keep it on there, and we'll keep an eye on it. But I think the force control room are doing an amazing job considering those peaks in demand that we get at certain times of year. Right, the next one.
So the next slide just describes our response times, which you'll see remain above our SLA of 80% for immediate calls, both rural and urban. I think it's a legitimate question to ask is, why is it 82% for our rural communities, 87% for our more urban areas? There is just a reality in that, in so much as the rural areas, if we're travelling to emergency calls, it takes longer to get there. I think particularly if you're out in the Dales. But nonetheless, I think our performance there reflects a real commitment to respond to the public when they need us. And in terms of our priority response, what you can see there is continuing to improve and continuing to edge towards that 20%. But this is all a trade-off, because I've been very, very clear about the importance of neighbourhood policing and preventative policing. The reality is you can put more resources into response and reactive policing, and you could have that at 100% if you wanted to. But what that would do is impinge on your ability to have neighbourhood policing, working in communities, undertaking effective problem solving, and making sure that we deal with the issues that matter most to our communities before they happen. So what you see there, I think, is a good level of response performance, certainly improving in terms of priority performance, and that's something that we will continue to do. I firmly believe that the answer to this is not putting more people into response policing. It is about working to prevent crime and antisocial behaviour in communities in the first place, so the volume of calls shrinks and we can continue to improve that performance for the calls that remain.
Thanks. just a reminder of the difference between the immediate and the priority response?
Yes, so it's immediate is within 10 minutes, priority is within an hour.
Yeah. And that priority rate within an hour, is that the same target for rural areas as well as in the urban areas?
But for priorities, it's the immediates that differ for rural and urban areas, just in terms of the practicalities of it.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. We can move on to the next one.
So ASB, so what you can see overall is that ASB continues to decrease. But what is quite notable this year is that whilst we've seen a decrease in the city, we've seen a decrease right across the county command, the coastal command has seen an increase, and that's continued, I think, really since the summer months. Now, some of that maybe just because we've had a particular hot summer, big crowds into the coastal command. But what we have noted is that there are particular issues in Scarborough around two particular hotspots around McDonald's, and I believe is it Alma Square. There are problem-solving plans in place around that. We've been very active in terms of our neighbourhood policing teams working there and encouraging the public to report this. So that's got a lot of attention from the local leadership out there. It's something that we continue to monitor as a command team to make sure that we can continue to drive down antisocial behaviour right across the county. So I think, you know, an overall decrease and continue to decrease. You remember over the course of the last financial year, we had a really significant decrease in antisocial behaviour, but particular issues at the coast that we are alive to and are working on to solve.
Brilliant. So my question really was just around those problem-solving plans and just a little bit more information about what the public could probably expect from that, particularly on the coast where we know that there's that increased problem.
So we implement a problem-solving plan where there is I mean, some antisocial behaviour problems get solved just by the day-to-day activities of neighbourhood policing teams, working with local partners to solve out small issues as they happen. Where we have a significant issue, where one starts to build up, and we observe that, a problem-solving plan is about taking a really structured approach, working with partners to, one, properly understand what the issue is and what are the factors that are causing it, analyse that, and try and understand it in terms of its temporal analysis, its location, the demography of the people involved, what the incentives might be for people to congregate in an area and misbehave, and then take structured activity. Now, that might be high visibility patrols, it might be train changes to street lighting, it might be the erection of CCTV, it might be using various civil powers to disperse people. It can be a range of activity. But it's undertaken in a really structured way, evidence-based. So we look to do things that we know have worked before, both here in North Yorkshire Police, but also using the evidence base that we get from the College of Policing to make sure that we tackle these issues and don't just disperse the issue, actually stop it, because it's that evidence-based problem solving that delivers really effective neighbourhood policing. And when I've spoken in the past on numerous occasions, when I talk about neighbourhood policing with purpose, that epitomises that, about understanding what the issues are and taking tangible action with partners to deal with it.
So just because you've mentioned the neighbourhood policing teams, which I know are kind of integral to this particular slide, just really whether or not the review of neighbourhood policing, which I know is we're now 8 months into the review of neighbourhood policing, just whether or not actually that is one of the reasons that it's having an impact in the other areas. I mean, I think the coastal areas are maybe slightly different in terms of the cause, but whether actually what you see is the relationship between that review of neighbourhood policing and the antisocial behaviour that's getting reported. Yeah.
So we obviously undertook a really comprehensive review of neighbourhood policing. The net effect of that, and you funded alongside the central government grant, you'll be aware that we got funding for an extra 32 neighbourhood police officers and 20 PCSOs. Now, we're still not seeing the full effect of that because, as you know, those officers were profiled in across the course of this financial year. And indeed, some of them will be starting in February and March, their journey. So, it actually takes a number of years for that to properly filter through. But what we have seen now is a very defined neighbourhood policing structure. We have changed the leadership in neighbourhood policing in certain parts of the force to make sure that we have got refreshed perspective in terms of how to tackle those problems. And I think that that is now starting to deliver. So if you look at neighbourhood crime, so when you look at neighbourhood crime like retail theft, theft from motor vehicle, theft off from motor vehicle, burglary, robbery, in totality, that's down nearly 10% across this financial year, which is really, really, really welcome. And I think I had a look the other day, actually, just in terms of thinking about the budget for this year. Much was made of what was called in 2019 the baseline, when the previous government started the uplift of police officers. My understanding is from 2019, neighbourhood crime is down by about 35%, but 10% of that is in the past year. So that rate of decrease is greater than it's been previously. So
Right.
I suppose the short answer to that question is yes, I do believe it's starting to work. There is more to do because, as I say, those resources that have been recruited across the course of the year, some of them are only just beginning to start in their training programme now. And it will take 2 to 3 years, I believe, for that to properly embed. But what we are starting to see now is the impact, and certainly the leadership around neighbourhood policing, I feel, is a lot stronger than it was perhaps some years ago, not least of which because we now have a chief inspector in each command whose sole job it is to deliver effective neighbourhood policing.
Yeah, no, it is. It's really good, and certainly from my perspective, it feels really clear, that relationship between these kind of crime numbers and that focus on the neighbourhood policing teams. And certainly the only thing I would just say, and we can move on, is how important it is for the public to have confidence in this data and to see that relationship between reporting antisocial behaviour and problems in their neighbourhoods and those neighbourhood policing teams. So, you know, we know that in certain communities people have less confidence and are less likely to report, but actually these numbers should really encourage people to make sure that if things are happening in their communities or in their neighbourhoods, that they do have the confidence to report, because actually there are dedicated teams out there who are actually making a difference, which is really, really welcome to see.
I'd follow that up. Absolutely, there are dedicated teams, and it is. I just stress it is really important that people report. You know, if I was sat here now, the figures are great, and it's great to see it going down. But I always have a healthy degree of what are people not reporting, because the most pernicious ASB, which normally involves the most vulnerable people, is the stuff that doesn't get reported. And it my plea would be is, if you are the victim of antisocial behaviour, we have dedicated neighbourhood teams, we've invested in them, we want to do something about it to keep you safe and feel safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you. We can move on to the next slide.
So crime volumes and arrests. So what you'll see there is an overall reduction of crime of about 4.2%. But what you do see in that is, and across the board, you see some very healthy reductions. Perhaps deal with some of the more challenging areas first. Drug offences, well, that's often driven by proactivity, and we have been very proactive in this work, particularly in York, in terms of going out, finding drug dealers, identifying them, locking them up. So whilst that has gone up as a result of the work of North Yorkshire Police being proactive. Robbery is an area that causes me concern. Some of that is driven by changing definitions, particularly around retail theft, and stuff that was previously reported as shoplifting, now being reported as robbery. That is an issue, but it's not the main issue. We have had some issues with robbery this year, and I think particularly issues involving e-bikes and Ciron bikes around the city, and that is something that concerns me. We have particularly our neighbourhood teams, where this is an issue, are switched onto it. They are starting to do work. We've seized 54 of these illegal electric bikes over recent months, and we are now starting to bear down on it, but that remains a continuing issue for us. And then the one around sexual offences, up 14%. Primarily, that is being driven, and not solely, but primarily that is being driven by increased reports coming through from the NCA around online offences. And that is a challenge for us as we go into the next budget year. You know, we have got to think about areas for investments, and our online child abuse teams are areas that are under extreme pressure at the moment. And it follows that if you are pushing more work through an already stretched team, that leads to a greater resource requirement around digital forensics because of the way that we investigate these offences. And down the line, if you've got more people coming out of the criminal justice system in receipt of some form of order or on the sex offenders register, our Mosterville teams that manage these offenders in the community, it's really important that we think about those. So that does present us with a strategic challenge going forward, which we've all got to have cognizance of. That said, if you then look at, you know, I talked about neighbourhood crime, bicycle theft down 21%. Now that's really significant, particularly given we know it's a challenge here in York because of, you know, lots of people use cycling as a mode of transport. But you know, across those acquisitive crime offences, you have seen some significant reductions across the course of the year. Burglary is down, arson and criminal damage is down, burglary residential is down. As I say, bicycle theft is down, shoplifting down by 5.7%, theft from the person down 22%. So these are really significant reductions in crime. So I do, you know, want to celebrate that, but by the same token, those areas that are red, we are alive to it, we are taking action, and we intend to continue to bear down on the people who are perpetrating this.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that sometimes those numbers can, you know, we all focus on the numbers and what direction they're going in, but actually every single one of the numbers in that 45,442, there are people behind most of that. And actually, if you can make that number smaller, which is what has happened, that is less people in need of victim services and support as a result. So actually, I completely agree that you've got to focus on the green as well as the red, because actually, you know, that from a public point of view is incredibly important to feel that we've got less victims in our region than we had previously. A couple of things that I did want to pick up on. One was just the kind of the crime types that allude to violence. There's obviously the ones on the chart specifically, but possession of weapons is the other one that concerned me slightly, and whether or not that's tied into the drug offences one, and just anything that you can say around that in terms of public assurances.
Possession of weapons tends to be driven by proactive activity that you find people with them. So there's an element around that. You know, in terms of the work that we've been doing and the offenders that we have been targeting, and we have been very, very proactive, particularly around York, in terms of dealing with people who would perpetrate the supply of drugs. These are the people that you tend to find in possession of weapons. So a lot of this is driven by proactivity as opposed to reactive issues.
Great. And then the other kind of at the other end, really. So the stuff relating to the cycle theft, that is, I mean, I'm just thinking back to a year ago when we were looking at these numbers, the cycle theft and the shoplifting, I think both numbers were red a year ago and are now significantly more green, which is really, really welcome. And certainly, you know, there's been very active work I know taking place in York, and I was contacted at the weekend by someone about the latest pendulum operation that I think had taken place maybe at the weekend in York in terms of the e-bikes. That has been something that has been a really hot topic among residents who are worried about the danger of some of those e-bikes and the way in which they've been adapted to get people around the city really, really quickly using paths and cycle paths that really aren't designed for vehicles going at that speed. Just thanks to those who are working on the pendulum, but anything else around that operation and the way it's been working?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just been very clear is that if you are riding one of these high-powered bikes, they are a motor vehicle and need to be used as such and insured as such and ridden within the law as it is. If we find people who are riding them on footpaths that they're not insured, we just take them off them. As I say, we've seized 54 of them so far, and we'll continue to do that. And we're you know, I'll be perfectly frank, I'm actively looking at ways that we're going to end up, they will be disposed of. They won't be getting them back. They'll be disposed of. So my message is very, very clear. Do not ride illegal electric bikes around York City Centre, because you do run the risk of us, you will be prosecuted and we will seize the bikes off you.
Great. Thank you for that. And I think that's a really important message, because it has been a really hot topic in the city, I know, for some time. We can move on to the outcomes slide if we can.
So this is a really positive story, I think, for North Yorkshire Police. We have continued to increase our outcomes across virtually the whole range of offences. And what you see now, and I think it says it in the paragraph at the bottom, in terms of where we are consistently within the top tier of forces in terms of both our charge rates and our overall positive outcomes. And we're going to continue to drive at that. One of the things, I mean, HMIC, as we'll probably touch on later in the meeting, have recently been into the force. One of the things that they've looked at is our plans for this year in terms of our volume crime review. We are adding, I think I could probably best describe, we're making some modifications into the flow of volume crime around the force, how we actually investigate it, what does governance look around that. And whilst we have got one of the highest charge rates in the country, I'm very clear that I want it to be the very best, and we continue to provide an excellent service to victims of crime, that we respond quickly, that we undertake a professional and proportionate investigation, and wherever possible, we are getting the right outcome for the victim. I've been very, very clear, and I say this to our staff all the time, is if you are responding to a victim of crime, you do it in such a way as if it was your mum or your dad or someone you absolutely care about every time. And I think that culture is starting to yield some results for the force.
Great, thank you for that. The only thing I wanted to pick up on, well, two things actually, but just on the, obviously the government published the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy just before Christmas. And actually it's really positive. I'm just picking out the crime types that we know that crime outcomes around a lot of the violence against women and girls are difficult normally for a lot of police forces. But we've got the sexual crime, excluding rape numbers, the sexual crime rape numbers, and the stalking numbers are the three that struck me that are all kind of going in the right direction. Just really whether there's anything else that you're looking at in those spaces to improve those outcomes, to encourage more women to report.
The first thing about is we take an absolutely victim-centred approach to this. You know, anyone who's been the victim of sexual violence, I would, you know, implore them to please do report it to us. You can have confidence in us. We take it incredibly seriously. Our Operation Soteria work, which has been a national programme to improve the way that we investigate this type of crime, is something that we've been undertaking for some time. We are continuing to develop that and continuing to challenge ourselves around that approach. My view is I want to see that number continuing to rise. You know, the thing I always say when I look at these figures is, yes, it's going in the right direction, but when you look at those numbers, there's a long way to go. Now, no one's saying that it's easy to investigate this type of offending. But what I can absolutely assure people is we will undertake a proper investigation. You will be treated compassionately. We will make sure that we provide you with the support that you need to recover from being the victim of that, and we will do everything that we possibly can from a criminal justice view to ensure that the people who have perpetrated this offence are brought to justice. That's
great, thank you. And obviously I commission a lot of those victim services and working with IDAS on, particularly around the domestic abuse, but also other support services for victims are something that we are very proud of delivering in our region, but also something we're looking at continually, ways in which we can improve those things. So again, as part of that work that we're going to do following the publication of the government strategy, is just looking at what else we can be doing and how we can do that support services for victims better than we are at the moment. But I think that's really encouraging to see those numbers going in that direction. Just one other just at the other end, just around fraud, which I know is a challenge again for most forces. Just whether or not, how do we compare on that kind of fraud crime outcome number? How do we compare to other places, and is that also just a really big number that sits behind that percentage?
Off the top of my head, Joe, I would have to come back to you on that, unless Ben can come in. Are you aware of that?
It's comparable, Chief. Fraud's obviously an anomaly there, in the sense there's quite complex reporting arrangements associated with fraud. A significant volume of fraud is, once it's assessed, routed to action fraud, as it says there, soon to be retitled. So it's more of a complex area in terms of crime recording, and a difficult one to compare with the other crime types listed in the crime outcome. So it does look unusual in comparison with the others.
And is the volume with fraud often, it's much bigger numbers that we're talking about, or not?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It absolutely is, because it's a volume type crime. So you know, there are a variety of forms of fraud, very often low value, online centered fraud, but in terms of volumes, in totality, it's significant.
Yeah,
I think the point I'd make about fraud, and it's interesting when you look at this in terms of crime arms, when you look at the sheer volume of fraud now, and particularly the online elements, you can't enforce your way out of this. You know, you can't enforce, you know, particularly when some of this online fraud is perpetrated. It might be someone sat on the other side of the world who is perpetrating it. The way to deal with fraud is about prevention, and that actually comes down to, one, making sure you've got the right education programs, particularly for, you know, how different demographics can keep themselves safe online. But also then there's a role for neighbourhood policing teams in terms of identifying vulnerability in communities and providing targeted crime prevention advice. But absolutely, by the same token, if we catch someone perpetrating this thing, of course we will take action. But let's not be under any illusions that enforcement action is going to reduce the level of fraud, because it's not. It's about looking at victims, identifying vulnerability, educating people to make sure that we can stay safe. We can all stay safe online, because I have to say, most of us could probably be better in terms of protecting ourselves from particularly from online fraud.
Yeah, and as I recall, our last thematic in the last OPM was focused on fraud and cybercrime. So if people want a bit more information about that, I think that session will be available with the papers from the previous police public meeting that we had, I think probably in October, November time. Right, great. I think that's it for that slide. We can move on to the next one, please.
So this is about stop and search. That gives you a sense of the number of stop and searches that we have done over the course of the last year, and the volume that 25.69% of those resulted in an arrest. Another 4% resulted in what we call a positive action. So that could be anything around a cannabis warning or something like that. It's about 30% result in some form of action, which is comparable certainly with other forces across the board. One thing that did take my eye when I saw this was 4 people being stop searched aged 10 and under. So in anticipating you might ask me a question about that, 3 of those relate to, and as you're aware, these charts are generated through all our MI systems, so I do apologise for that. But 3 of those individuals were adults who refused to give their date of birth. Therefore, it was automatically recorded as the date of the stop. So that's 3 of them out of it straight away. The other one was a child who was suspected of having stolen a knife from a shop. Now that's, whilst it's recorded as a stop and search, that is very clearly a safeguarding issue. So I just wanted to clarify that right from the start. That's helpful. Yeah, you know, just to put that. I'll probably pause it there and just say, have you got any questions around any of this?
A couple of things. Just so if there are 3 in the 10 and under category who didn't give a date of birth, what is the difference between those and the not known 41 of them that were not knowns?
I'd have to come back to you.
That might be a recording issue.
Yeah.
And then the only other question, which I think I've asked before, is the searches on under 18s by officer gender, the bottom right hand corner. Again, it's the unknown category that concerns me probably more than anything else, because does that mean we're not asking?
It could do. I'll have to come back to you on that particular
And then
around.
okay, that's fine. And then the only other thing I did want to raise, which again I think I've raised before, is the ethnicity data kind of balance to the census, which I think I have asked about before, and just seeking assurance really, whether you're assured that is proportionate, given that for example the 4.26% stop and search Asian or Asian British is whatever that is, 3 times higher or more, no, more than twice as high as the census data would indicate. Just whether you're assured about those cases.
Well, what I would say to you this is, the census data is one thing, but you can't consider that in isolation. You're well aware, Joel, the issues we have with cross-border criminality, particularly around the top of the ground, and particularly down the bottom from Bradford or Leeds. So you have to take into account the fact that the demographic of some of our surrounding areas is significantly different than that in North Yorkshire, and I absolutely expect, particularly on nights, our teams to be patrolling those borders, and if they find people who are coming over here to commit crime, to steal plant equipment from our farmers, to burgle houses and steal cars, I expect my officers to be stopping them and taking some substantive action. If that involves stopping and searching them, so be it.
Yeah, no, I'm just, that the question was really just whether you're assured, but it sounds like
yeah,
you are.
I mean, we obviously we have a scrutiny process around all of this, and I just make that point is I can look at the demographics of North Yorkshire and take a view, but as I say, we're surrounded by demographics that are significantly different.
And but we currently don't have our offender data available by ethnicity, because at the moment we're comparing stop and search to the census. We're not comparing it to our offender profile. Is that something that might be?
We can put that in.
I think that would be helpful as a benchmark again, because it would give me some assurance on the point that you were making about county lines, and absolutely legitimate decisions that officers would be making if they thought that they needed to stop someone. And again, I think that would probably provide me with a little bit of assurance, if that's possible to add that in.
If I could be so bold as to make a suggestion, this would be a good area for the Independent Scrutiny and Oversight Board for the Race Action Plan to have a look at and do some in-depth qualitative research.
On this call, I'm sure, is scribbling down furiously that as an action for us to take away. So we'll absolutely,
because I think in that forum probably you could have a more in-depth look than we'd have the opportunity to here, and you can look at your offending data in terms of where offences are taking place, your perpetrator data. You can have a look at stop search. You can have a look at criminal justice outcomes in the round.
Great. Yeah, that would be that's helpful. Okay, I think it's the last slide.
And this just relates to our workforce at the moment, which is fairly self-explanatory in terms of the number of officers that we've got, and the number of those that are neighbourhood officers, and the uplift in year. And you can see the volume of specials that we've got, volunteers and police cadets.
Great. My only question on that, and I've raised this before, a couple of things. One, just generally in terms of our workforce profiles, our full-time equivalent to headcount, as in our number of officers who might be, or PCSOs, or staff members for that matter, who might be working part-time, how does that compare to kind of the national average in that area? Are we particularly low in terms of the numbers of people who are able to do part-time work?
If I'm honest, I wouldn't be able to give you a definitive. My sense here is that we're probably not out of kilter with other places. What I'd say is that we are continuing to look at how people can work flexibly in this organisation where possible. I am very keen that where it's possible and we can maintain service delivery for the public, that we are a flexible workforce, because that's really important in terms of having people who won't have the experience to be able to deliver, particularly in our neighbourhoods, but also I do want people to be able to have a good work-life balance, because policing is a challenging career, and we want to generate the circumstances where people can continue to deliver for our communities throughout the different stages of life. I don't put it in any more broad terms than that.
Yeah, and then I guess for me it also relates to my memory from the inspection data from before the inspection was that our sickness rate is relatively high compared to some other force areas. And just the reason I keep asking about this part-time working is whether or not actually more opportunities to work part-time or flexibly might actually help our sickness data if people were able to or felt like they would be able to work part-time.
I mean, there is a very significant programme of work to tackle sickness in the organisation, and you recall from we are starting to make some headway with that. As I say, we've over the course of the last 12 months that we have completely revised our policies around flexible working in terms of the application process, and off the top of my head, I can't remember what the figure is now, but I think it was something like, I think about 75% of flexible working applications that were put in over the course of the last year were granted at the basically the first point of application. We've, as you'd expect in any organisation, a number of them were rejected, and then we tend to have a negotiation with those that are in between. If we can't necessarily accommodate someone's first choice of a flexible working plan, we will look at how we can do it, either in the role that they're in or in another operational role throughout the organisation. So we do take it very, very seriously. I've been very clear about the importance of a diverse workforce with diversity of thought and diversity of understanding of communities, and having a properly structured, flexible working policy that allows people to do that, but maintains, above all, service delivery to the community is really important.
Yeah, and then just finally, partly because I was at the long service ceremony on Monday, but I just about the special constables. Am I right in remembering from Monday that the inspector of the specials in North Yorkshire Police has just served 40 years of service?
The chief officer, the specials chief
officer. Sorry, I got the title wrong.
Sharon Mobley, 40 years she's been doing it.
Exactly, and I suppose just as a tribute to her, obviously for the 40 years service that she's given, but also just whether there are any plans around the recruitment of specials underway, and anything that I can do to support that, I'd be very happy to. But also just congratulations again to Sharon for 40 years, which is a legendary amount of time.
Well, I'll say this is having been a police officer for nearly 30 years. Sharon is the first special constable I've come across in nearly 3 decades of policing who has done 40 years, and her contribution and her commitment to service is just up there with anything that I've seen. She's absolutely marvellous, and does a brilliant job in terms of leading our special constabulary. So we have 71. I mean, the recruitment of special constables is a challenge at the moment, and I make no secrets around that. At a time when we weren't recruiting full-time police officers, you see that your numbers of specials climbs exponentially because people see it as a stepping stone to becoming a full-time police officer. We are continuing to recruit at the moment, and we have been heavily recruiting over the past couple of years. So you don't tend to get that many people joining the specials as a stepping stone to become a police officer, because if you've got the right skills and experience, there are enough opportunities nationally for you to get into policing anywhere. So that's why it shrunk over a long period of time. We do get some people joining us just to get a sense of what it's like, because it, as I often say, it is a job like no other. But that's few and far between. So by and large, the majority of that 71 specials that we have are people who are part of the community in North Yorkshire who want to give back to their community. And the more, when you speak to them, they find it's incredibly fulfilling being able to do that. So we're recruiting, we've got another intake starting in February, and we're out recruiting more at the moment. I'd like to see that number at over 100. And I just appeal to anyone who's watching this, and more broadly to all our communities, is the opportunity to be a citizen in policing, to be a police officer, a volunteer police officer, with all the powers that every police officer has to work in your community to make it safe, is hugely fulfilling. It's an important part of our workforce and an important part of the effort, particularly in neighbourhoods, to make sure that we continue to make this county safer for everyone. So, there's as I said, we're just about to start. There's another recruitment campaign in March. I'm very, very keen that people join us, and would encourage them to do so. And anything you can do, Deputy Mayor, to promote that, I'd be more than grateful.
Well, I think Sharon Mobley Holmes wants me to push a bed, but it may be that I can't do that. This is the bed race, not randomly in the Nesborough bed race, but I think there's also a combined authority team, so maybe we just need a bit of healthy competition in that space for the bed race. But the yeah, that's great. And I think we've already discussed the neighbourhood policing numbers. Just I think you alluded to it in one of your answers to one of the other questions, just about where we're at with the uplift of the new officers and PCSOs and their training. Did you say there's some more just coming through in February?
So I forget, but that number was always profiled in over the course of the year, so not all of that number, but by the third, that's where we will be by the 31st of March of this year.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
And that was always the plan.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Right, that I think concludes the performance slides, and we're going to move on to the thematic presentation, which we've got Chief Inspector David Hunter on the call. Hello again, David. We're going to look at the Safer Streets Winter of Action, which was a Home Office government-led campaign which provided, I think, some additional funding over the winter months. And we're going to have a presentation about how that has worked, I think.
Yes, that's right, Deputy Mayor. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chief, Mr. Mosley, and everyone else as well. Thanks for inviting me to talk through the Home Office Safer Streets Winter of Action programme. Intend to take you through it over sort of the next 20 to 30 minutes, of course, with some questions time included in that also, and to try and make it as least complicated as possible, mainly for anybody online who starts to lose track. So stop me if it becomes too much.
Don't worry, I will.
Hopefully, I've pitched it in the right way. Yeah, as already said, I'm David Hunter. I'm a Chief Inspector here in North Yorkshire Police and work on the local policing support team responsible for harm reduction, mental health, citizens and policing, neighbourhood policing from a strategic sort of delivery side, alcohol licensing and hate crime. And indeed, the neighbourhood policing on the strategic side brought in our support to the delivery of the Home Office Safer Streets campaign. Next slide, please, Lila. So the winter initiative followed on from the summer initiatives. Just to give some background on that, the Home Office Safer Streets initiative aims to reduce serious harm and increase public confidence across the country, halving within a decade knife crime and violence against women and girls. It's the overall objectives. Some of the delivery of that is done at the moment through seasonal initiatives, which it appears to be going to continue into 2026, and the Home Office share that information with us periodically about the focus of where that's going to be. So 2025, the Safer Streets Summer Initiative, which again I had the privilege of coordinating and leading on for us alongside Tamara over at the Combined Authority, and indeed under the direction of Tamara at the Combined Authority, focused on 5 key areas, which, as you can see, the outcomes for which nationally were a real good success. it was the first seasonal initiative that was delivered nationally. So of course, as you would expect from something like that, there was lots of lessons learnt from across the whole country, and equally some lessons learnt here too, which we were able to feed back and then take into the winter initiative, which I'll talk about shortly. So nationwide engagement, they see 640 plus town centres involved. The approach that was taken again was around enforcement, but that not just from police enforcement, also from partner agency enforcement. Again, looking at business crime and a refocus around business resilience, and indeed working with businesses in initiatives such as target hardening, but equally crime prevention and offender detection. Lots of community engagement. Again, when I say multi-agency, I obviously mean across all of the public agencies there in a front facing fashion. And of course, I talk mainly to the North Yorkshire Police delivery of that. Youth engagement, and as you would expect, bearing in mind it was focused around the Safer Town Centres initiative, is that nighttime economy piece. Again, not just an issue faced here in North Yorkshire with nighttime economy across our town centres, but equally one of culture across the whole country.
Just before you move on, could you just give us a sense of what this national initiative has looked like? Maybe you're about to come onto it, but could you just, in terms of those numbers, those big numbers on that page, just giving me any kind of sense of what that means in terms of the scale for us in North Yorkshire?
Yeah, absolutely, and indeed, I will come on to it. But actually, it's a really good point to cover it. In the initial summer campaign, the Home Office were prescriptive around the town centres that we would focus on. So again, not just from the policing angle, but I mainly speak to that, but from the whole initiative to focus around specific town centres. That did present some challenges to us because some of the data that we already knew when we saw some of those designated targeting town centres was that they didn't necessarily mirror with our own data and our own community needs. So actually, one of the things we fed back after the summer initiative was exactly that being really prescriptive about where we have to patrol doesn't necessarily mean that as a force we're going to make the difference that we know we are able to make if we use our BI data to be able to have targeted delivery. So that's something that was accepted nationally, and the feedback was given to the Home Office from across all forces and partners that it would be far more effective if we were able to designate our own locations, again key to where we knew the geography meant that we were going to have the crime types that were identified.
Great, thank you.
So that's all. Again, just covering off because I wanted to touch on this very briefly because the main content's around winter rather than what previously came, but it's important to understand where we came from. A national view of 105,000 visible patrol hours delivered. That's on top of normal policing. 10,000 arrest and enforcement actions. The multi-agency partnerships and tech innovations improved efficiency, and I'll talk about one of our own tech efficiencies and innovations that we've launched and driven forward here. And lots of positive community feedback, branding, and the amplified impact. So a lot of publicity, communication strategies around that, including what we did here. So next slide, please, Lila. Thank you. So as you can see, the winter of action again had a time period, a shorter time scale, thankfully, than the summer campaign, which ran over a 6-month period. This one running from the 1st of December up to the 31st of January. So we're still technically delivering operations around the force that come under the winter of action operational heading. Building on the Safer Streets Summer Initiative and the successes from that, which I just talked about, and equally again, the thing that is very complementary from our side was the acceptance from the Home Office to look at the feedback that was given around some of the areas that maybe didn't work so well and actually just change them completely for the winter of action. So taking on board that feedback to work together to maximise the delivery for the public. And again, the overall aim being to maintain public safety during the critical winter months. The critical winter months, as we already know, being a key period, an increase of the public going into our town centres, shopping areas and such like. So the coordinated intelligence-led multi-agency response, again, building on the good work of our neighbourhood policing teams around the force, our specialist operation teams around the force, coming together to look at where our data was showing that we would have an increase, again, using historic data, but equally local policing knowledge around where that would be. Putting together the early planning and stakeholder engagement, so not just working in isolation from the policing angle, so drawing on all of our partners when it came to events. And again, I think I've said a couple of times that the Home Office delivery of that was has always been very keen to show that policing itself is a key stakeholder in the Winter of Action initiative, but actually their objective for it was to work across agencies, coordinated centrally by the Mayor's office, and indeed, as I said, led by Tamara Stevens, the combined authority, with the overall strategic direction for that, which
Can you
has
just
gone very well.
talk me through what I can read the green boxes, but the type is quite small. So just is any of that focus different to the focus that there had been in the previous summer?
Yes, absolutely. So again, that's where I was talking about the expanded priorities. So bringing in retail crime as that specific focus over the winter months. That the street crime element again. So we talked before about the violence against the person crimes, which the chief spoke to before. Antisocial behaviours, we know, on nighttime economy, and again that nighttime economy and all of the other periods mixed alongside the violence against women and girls initiatives that we have to make sure they were all running in cognizance. But again, like I said before, the good bit about this was that we were able to add on additions to the sort of directed operational area that we were given previously, and we were able to be sensible with it and increase, for instance, use data looking at Monk's Cross, obviously a significant retail area for us in York, Clifton Moor as again of significant retail area, designer outlet, both those three areas, of course, when it came to the town centre initiative in summer, weren't included in the Home Office ask, but actually because of the feedback we gave, we were able to change that and look at where we knew we were going to have, or we could predict that we would have an increase in shop theft in particular, and again crimes against the person, so shop thefts off person and such like, as people were going out to engage in the holiday activities and shopping and such like on the lead up to that. That hyperlocal crime mapping is what that they call that in the specifics for it. So that's one of the green boxes, which are looking even smaller to me without my reading glasses on. And again, then look at that local planning, as I think I've covered, to be able to really focus in on what our town centres are, and exactly where we can make the most impact.
And just in terms of those town centres, would those be the kind of same town centres as the summer, or did you target slightly different areas because it was a winter campaign and you knew that the retail pressure would be different?
Yeah, we targeted differently, looking at what the key issues, and of course the strategic direction from the Home Office on this particular Winter of Action initiative focused on. And I'm just a couple of slides away from that.
Oh, fine. Carry on.
I knew I'd included it, and I've just had a quick check, so I know I come to that in just a moment.
Oh yeah, you do. Sorry, I've just seen.
Next slide, please, Leila. So again, that operational focus, as I've touched on, again, looking at retail, again, really targeting prolific offenders. We have here in North Yorkshire, really reassuringly, we've got each of our chief inspectors, as the chief explained before, each of our neighbourhood policing teams is headed up by a chief inspector on the commands responsible for the delivery. Each one of those chief inspectors themselves has an operational portfolio, which comes under one of the headings of the initiative, and again their overall objective being to target this, and you'll have met before the York Chief Inspector Ryan Chapman, who is lead for retail crime. Again, a real focus for him as his normal daily business, with some of the key retail areas in the force within his policing command and his national portfolio, but equally linking into achieving success in the Windsor of Action. Antisocial behaviours, we know that sits with our Chief Inspector over on our coastal command, Chief Inspector Lucy McNeil. Nighttime economy and violence against women and girls, that's actually sitting with our nighttime economy tactical lead, who is Amanda Reeder. And violence against women and girls there, the spiking prevention, safe exit routes, venue standards. Again, the national operation around spiking prevention, led by Inspector Andy Godfrey from local policing support. Street crime, again, we have hotspot patrols, which you will have heard of taking place around the force. And again, I'll talk some more about the innovative tech behind the scenes that's being rolled out, not only for hotspot patrols, but also across response and specialist operations policing, to get maximum use of that really good bit of digital kit. Mobile CCTV, facial recognition, which I know Ryan is working on and leading on with his retail crime angle. Youth diversion, again, really key for our schools liaison and our safeguarding teams, and our dedicated sergeant here who works on LPS, who oversees the youth diversionary projects. Indeed, Boss, I know you were invited to one. Saw some communications on that later on at one of the schools projects over at Skipton.
I'm going, yes, soon.
Indeed, I did see that. So you'll get to see firsthand on some of that youth diversionary work, which is nationally renowned, actually, and goes back to my own childhood when I think about the delivery of it in schools. And then we move on to the environmental improvements, again, talking how this wasn't just an operation that's being led by policing. Of course, it's far wider reaching on the lighting, graffiti removal, cleanliness. So the working with our partners in relation to that, and the community safety hubs. Okay, next slide, please.
Oh, sorry, I just had one
sorry.
question on that. Sorry, one question on that slide, just about the spiking, the spiking prevention. Just what was happening in that space around spiking prevention, and who was being targeted for that?
Okay, so Operation Leicester is our national anti-spiking campaign. Of course, we engage in that fully here as a force. So with our dedicated lead to that coming under my own team, who's Inspector Andy Godfrey, who's leading on that in the harm reduction arena. So that's seen a lot of work from our licensing team, training. The DPS is on the premises, working with staff, retailers to identify offender behaviour, to identify campaigns such as Ask Angela, and making sure that that's really embedded across the whole force area. And not only making sure that externally it's embedded too, but internally as well. So comms campaigns for our officers to make sure that they're identifying the opportunities to talk through spiking prevention, but equally to look at the data, which I'm not able to share just yet, but to look at the data around reporting and the identification of the drugs used in spiking around that. And I know there's a report to come on that in due course.
Great. Yeah, the reason I'm interested is because I think it's probably a useful issue for conversations that I'm having with health colleagues, just to understand the interface between policing and health in that space. But I'm sure the safeguarding leads are picking it up. But equally, in the conversations I'm having with health partners, that just would be useful to be cited on the work going on in that space.
Yeah. No problem. I'm happy, obviously, to share any of that with you. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So again, moving on to the key policing operations, we talked before that the winter initiative clearly falling around the Christmas period, where people would be out enjoying themselves, you know, shopping, getting all those presents in, and really sort of, you know, filling up the town centres. So you look at the wards and the key areas from that, you can see stretch across the county command there. Again, please stop me if you want to ask about any of the specific areas. The city and Selby, exactly as you would think, and the coast command. I wanted to talk
Are those decided by demand, like previous demand, where you think that you've got particular issues?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
we worked with BI with our team there to look at where those issues fell, and the town centres where they were. I can see the chief's put his hand up, sir.
Yeah, I'll just to comment on that, and thanks, David. It's a good point. I mean, everything that we do, we try and do on the basis of a critical understanding of demand, and making sure that if we are putting extra resources into an area, it's to enhance our capabilities to deal with that demand, that we've identified a demand gap. So it's a theme for this, but I'd like to, you know, so that, and I hope that is reflected in certainly in our next HMIC report that will be due out, you know, later in the year, that we do in this force have a really good understanding of demand, and that's what drives our activity.
Thank you. That's helpful. I suppose the counterpoint, I suppose, to the priority decision making, which is completely understandable, is what assurances to give the people who don't live in the places on that list about the activity around antisocial behaviour and tackling crime in the places that aren't on those lists, which is obviously is a lot of places in our region. But I'm just really what the assurance is around the neighbourhood policing in those areas.
So the assurance is that we have 11 properly resourced neighbourhood teams, and we talked on an earlier slide about the resources, and those neighbourhood teams are there day in and day out to deal with these issues on behalf of the very local communities that they serve. Any force in the country will have that, make sure that we have an adequate baseline service to deal with these issues right across the geographical area. But this is about having the flexibility to deal with areas that have a particular issue, and that's what this is about. And it'd be no different than, you know, we do Operation Tornado every month, which is a show of force, but it doesn't replace what we do on a day-by-day basis. And the Winter of Action doesn't replace what we do on a day-by-day basis. It augments it.
Great, thank you. Once you're ready, David, you can move on to the next one.
Thank you. So the slide you saw just previously, I'm going to come back to it when I talk about VisiBeat in a moment. So the operation deployment is about the targeting of antisocial behaviour hotspots around the force, which I know you'll be familiar with, and the Home Office extra funding around the reassurance and the safeguarding communities and protecting people from antisocial behaviour and responding to it effectively. So and that's a force-wide operation, which I'll come back to in a moment when I talk about VisiBeat. So again, taking down into the command areas, I want to talk about some of the successes to the Winter of Action focus, in particular some really good work in Scarborough. Operation Snowstorm there, a coordinated multi-strand policing initiative focused on Scarborough Town Centre throughout December. An umbrella operation integrating several targeted efforts to address seasonal and persistent issues in the area, including violence against women and girls, antisocial behaviour, and nighttime economy. What I liked about this particular part of the operation was its flexibility. So around the force, dates were chosen, using that data, as we've talked about, to target our resources. What I liked about this has been written in such a way over on the Coast Command that it could be stood up at short notice as a response to a spontaneous development in a particular problem area, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to note it. Now, the Coast have worked really hard in the extra hours that they've put into, again, and I think the boss used the term augmenting our conventional policing delivery to work in this preventative arena around particularly the nighttime economy, the shop theft, the areas that the Home Office had asked us to look at. So you're looking at the over on the coast there in Scarborough and a Rydale command of 437 extra patrols. So that's extra officers out on the beat. Again, it broken down into what they were doing at the time, and I'll go into how we did that with the solution on the next slide, I think it is, or the slide after, and breaking down about how much time they actually spent out on foot. Again, this is extra time as opposed to what we would normally be doing on a daily basis to target those people engaged in antisocial behaviour, committing nighttime economy, retail crime, violence against women and girls. And as you can see, there's some really real significant distance covered there that some of our surrounding forces and equally some of our national colleagues wouldn't ever be used to seeing on a slide like this. Really good arrests there. They're really proud of the arrests that they made, being there on scene, being there as a preventative tool, but equally being there to take action very quickly and swiftly when crimes have occurred, and making some good arrests there.
Just
Okay.
before you move on, so yes, I mean the distances are I think important to acknowledge in a region of our size and geography. So obviously we must have thicker boots than everyone else in terms of the shoe leather that people get through. But the I guess the question I had just from a public perspective was just, obviously these are additional patrols from existing officers, so presumably this additional investment is additional hours that people work. So is this overtime that officers and PCSOs would be working?
Some of the work is centred around overtime. So the Antisocial Behaviour Fund, the government funding particularly to target ASB, yeah, absolutely. Those officers are around the force working targeted times in key locations and hotspots around the force, providing that extra policing. So yes, some of it is a commander decision around targeting their resources into the different places at the different times. And then I think really topical before, because I was really interested, because citizens and policing comes under my own portfolio area. They actually quite a large number of the hours was carried out with our special constabulary alongside as well, and quite a few of the operations in the town centres from the publicity aspect again had our police support volunteers and our police cadets working on them as well. So really embracing our citizens and policing element as that important part of the visible public working with us in policing as part of policing.
Great, yeah, thank you. That's really helpful.
Okay, so again, just finishing off the some of the key operations, and you touched on it before around Operation Pendulum and Operation Tornado in the city. The city had a unique spike to crime being committed, and again, town centre related crime being committed on the e-scooters, and of course the Chief Inspector there led an effective operation, the Operation Pendulum, to target that, which continues and has seen some real good results. Operation Cracker, we don't choose the names on these just because we like them. They come out of a database, so it's not like we just choose them because they fit. But that one does fit perfectly for the county command there. Again, Chief Inspector Simon Williamson over there leading on an operation they're targeting Hambleton's market towns. Again, our data shows, but equally, being a local officer or having worked all over the force, it stands to reason that you know that there'd be an increase in crime over the winter period, the Christmas period, in our market towns as people start to do their shopping and the bright lights appeal. So that operation's been going on over there for the county command.
That's great. And actually, I think that is really reassuring. I think a lot of people might think that most of this additional resource goes into the kind of big shopping centres into the city of York or into Harrogate or into Scarborough. But actually, it's really reassuring, I think, for those retailers in the market towns to know that actually there are also targeted operations going on in our market towns, which I know that David Scaife, the mayor, would be really keen to see, given how much work he's doing around high street support across the wider combined authority. So that's really reassuring. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think that's probably, again, just to cover for that extra reassurance. I'm looking at a list of the operations, and I'm not gifted with the time to be able to go through all of them with you, but looking around our force, you know, the Selby Town Centre, the district, the extra work there, the extra nighttime economy patrols, the reintroduction of the night marshals there, all add into that safer town centres feel. So people are able to feel safe when they're out enjoying the town centres across the whole of our force, not just looking at the city centre and not just looking at the retail parks, although they have been very well serviced with Operation Harmony, Operation Ball at Vanguard, and the list continues in relation to that.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
So again, I realise I'm ever so slightly over on time. I've only got 2 more things to cover. I'll be swift as I possibly can. VisiBeat, an application, that's the word I was looking for, an application that is supporting us in our innovative approach to looking at where the demand is against where we put our people. So somewhat complicated in the world of police IT to explain without droning on for quite a long time and losing more people. But this is a simple GPS tracking system. I say simple, I mean simple for most people who use their phones every day, that we've brought into policing, that works alongside our other policing systems to show where we can put our people into hotspot areas to be able to deliver policing and be able to record how much time and what exactly they're doing there, which then gives the direct correlation between reported crime and detected crime, and really goes down into exactly how long they were they were at, the locations they were at, and how long for, and what it was they were doing when they were there, and what it was they encountered when they were there. So it really intense on learning about what works. What it also does is allow us to geofence. So for our officers' mobile devices, their mobile devices will alert them when they go into one of the areas that are identified. So talking about the hotspot policing is particularly what I'm used to doing, but the rollout for further on that allows us to tell officers who are going into a particular area about the issues that affect that area. So it might well be that I'm driving from York, Fulford to headquarters at Northallerton as a really realistic example, and I come through the 168 through Romanby and into Northallerton, but I'm not aware that there's an issue with antisocial behaviour in Romanby with people congregating on that road. This is obviously not a real example. What my mobile device would do was tell me that that's what I was within. So it would give me an alert to tell me I was within that location, and it would then give me information around the people who were committing antisocial behaviour, or indeed whatever crime type it was within that area, and where they were and how I was likely to encounter them. Then indeed when I came out of that area, it gives me an activation for me to be able to record what I've done about that. And again, that example fits in a loose sense, but you'll appreciate that's an example of somebody travelling rather than being targeted towards it. So you can see the benefits to an officer having immediate information and intelligence as they're deployed into an area, so they can best serve the community regardless of where they're actually from within the force, even though they're working or moving through a different area. And that's there's a handful of forces in the country who are using it, and what we've managed to do, I think we are the third force to use it. We've thankfully able to use our colleagues at South Yorkshire and our colleagues at Humberside to learn from a lot of the issues they had when they brought it out in the development stages, so that we've been able to pick up at a really good point where they've already learned from some of the issues they've encountered. that we haven't. So that's newly put out to our response colleagues and our specialist operations teams to be able to use. However, our ASB hotspot operations, those 19 operations around the force, have been running for some time now, and VCB has been instrumental in making those operations work and giving the information and intelligence to officers, and then the data recording for us at the other end.
Great.
A good success and use from the Home Office funding that was given to us.
Really, that's really helpful. So I feel slightly like a dinosaur asking these questions. So sorry if they're stupid questions. But could you just give me a sense of what whether there are, one of the issues that we have in our region is just kind of mobile signal, and just making sure that devices, you know, would actually activate. I mean, actually, York City Centre is one of the worst places for decent signal in the region. But both signal and whether there's anything to be mindful of in that VisiBeat space around signal, and also just officer training, bearing in mind that I'm asking that question in a kind of technical dinosaur kind of way, just whether or not that is also a challenge for officers picking up this technology.
Well, I totally understand. I'm sure most people will. My 8-year-old can use an iPad better than I can, which is terrifying because I don't even feel that old. But suddenly it happens. So yeah, we've spent quite a significant amount of time training our officers in VisiBeat as part of the rollout and delivery of it. I think it's probably fair to say that on our mobile devices, the software is intuitive, so it requires very little training for them to be able to understand and use it. But they have received it, and equally we have problem-solving guides they can access very quickly should they encounter an issue that they don't understand. But from the technical side, that's all very specialist, and I don't even understand that side of it myself. We haven't encountered, we did anticipate, and we had plans in place to be able to understand and how we would respond to having issues with a number of things. So battery life of our mobile devices, of course, having this system running all the time when an officer was on duty, and then equally, as you've already covered there, the mobile data challenges we have. And we do have them, but they haven't been prohibitive in this yet. We thankfully haven't encountered the mobile data issues, and I think we do have the problems, but they're not sort of long-term issues. So the officers' movements often re-engages the mobile data before it completely becomes ineffective. So it could, because they're moving, because they're walking, because they're driving, because, you know, they may stand still, but then they move off. It feels like it hasn't been an issue for us in this project so far. And then just one quick thing to cover off. We ask our officers to log on to it, so that the system itself knows that they are on duty for those periods of time. So we take away some of the opportunity for false data recording, where an officer drives home from work or gets the train or gets the bus, but they've forgot to log out. So they do that at the start, so that the device itself automatically logs them out at the time they're due to finish shift. Of course, they can amend that, but it was the safest way of not getting false data. So the data is as accurate as we can possibly make it with the human side and with the digital side.
Great, thank you.
And then I'll just cover off very quickly on what we've seen so far, appreciating that I'm currently writing the report to get to Tamara, so Tamara can report to the Home Office on the policing side of it. We've seen hundreds, as I covered off just for the Scarborough Command, hundreds of extra patrols delivered in the town centres over December. Seen lots of arrests made for shop theft, violence, serious antisocial behaviour. We've seen criminal behaviour orders and dispersal powers used. The dispersal powers are a common police tool that we do use on a regular basis, but the CVOs themselves nationally had seen a reduction, so this has allowed us to relook at that. And I know that at least one has been issued in relation to it, and they are quite a complex bit of law to administer. And then we've been getting really strong feedback from the businesses and communities, again, particularly around the theft, retail crime, and the visibility in our town centres. I think the operation has achieved quite a lot of what it intended to do, to put police in the right place at the right time, and to make people see them and to feel safe, but equally to deter crime and to detect it with their presence. I think I've referenced quite a lot of our operations to go through, but we, just to cover off some of the partnership working for reassurance that it is taking place. But again, I'm speaking only realistically for the police delivery of this, but I can see, the councils, the support with that PSPO enforcement, leaflet distribution, environmental improvements. So there's been some lighting improvements and some cleanups of some of the town centre areas. The joint patrols with retailers and businesses, so with store detectives and with business improvement district marshals, and indeed the reintroduction of the night marshals down at Selby. Community organisations, engagement events, looking at a safe space introduction in York City Centre, being led by Superintendent Hayward Noble and Chief Inspector Ryan Chapman in the York Command there for a safe space within the city centre. Lots of youth diversionary activities across the force area, again with the holidays and food activities programme there during the school holidays. And then health and transport service work around harm reduction, safeguarding the nighttime economy, and working with transport operators. Again, key business for neighbourhood policing to be working across with the multi-agency partners. And I already covered the special constabulary deployment.
What's encouraging about that is that actually the slide talks a lot about the kind of enforcement side, but in what you're saying, there's actually a whole load of kind of prevention and just kind of much more positive policing, I suppose is probably the way I'd think about it, ways of responding to this. And it's not just about arresting people, and it's actually a lot of this work is also about preventing crime and antisocial behaviour.
Yeah, absolutely. We've changed very much in the years as time's gone on for policing. Our partner work is almost our first starting point on the majority of policing issues that we have. And
great.
So
yeah, and a policing crime plan priority, which I'm sure is what the Chief Constable's about to say.
I think the point is well made, is that yes, you've got to do some enforcement action, but you've got to do it in a fair and proportionate way. You've got to be visible because it reassures the public, but you've got to, when you're doing these initiatives, have one eye on the future. If we are reliant on just having a winter of action every year and a summer of action, we'll still be doing this in 10 years' time. So it really is important that this is some extra activity across a range of different areas, but it complements, what our schools officers are doing in schools, what we're doing on a day-by-day basis in terms of engaging with communities. So all in all, and you are right, it is a policing crime priority, but even before it was a policing crime priority, it's central to the best way to deliver policing to a community. So absolutely, we've tried to deliver what I think is a balanced operation, and I think that you can see the results both in the short term over the winter, but I hope that it has a longer lasting impact in terms of reducing offending and making people feel safe.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And the final bit to it is the sort of the closure, the reporting mechanism for the end of the operation, which is the single point return, which I will do from the policing side and share through to Tamara to be able to give the returns to the Home Office. Again, report back on the key activity, so that there'll be a working group nationally around what's worked well, so we can learn from each other, particularly around some of the stuff that we've done with VisiBeat mixed against some of the work that other forces have done around facial recognition and how that's worked. There's lots of sharing that we do during the review on these operations.
And when you think back to the performance data that we were looking at before, these things all tie together, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Brilliant. Thank you
Um,
ever so much
I think that's it.
for talking us through those slides and for all the additional work that has taken place both last summer and is still going on, because there's still in the eternal month that is January, another week and a day to go in January. So there'll be another week and a day, presumably, of this activity going on. Around safer streets, but that's brilliant and really reassuring, I think, both the approach but also the impact that it's having for the public. So thank you ever so much for your presentation. You are very welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting, but please don't feel obliged to stay. We've got 2 more sections to go through. I've got some spotlight questions to go through now, and then there's going to be a third-party reports section with ACC Moseley on the inspection and the inspectorate, but please don't feel that you have to stay, because you've done your duty there with those slides. So entirely up to you. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye, sir.
Just moving on, a few areas to pick up in the spotlight section. One that I wanted to ask, there's a couple of things that are kind of slightly, some of them are more national hot topics and some of them are more local hot topics. One was just around the rumour mill that's been going on in the national media around the policing reform white paper and whether or not it's coming out. We think it's coming out on Monday. Just really the concern from my perspective really is around both accountability and rurality. So one of our biggest challenges is the rural challenge of our geography and ensuring that we get the balance of policing right to serve our rural communities as well as the urban areas. And that would be my big concern around what might be missing from the white paper, but we won't know until Monday. I'm also concerned about whether or not the devolution and the combined authority are being appropriately acknowledged in that, given that we have got lots of opportunities that we're actively pursuing through the combined authority. And then the third thing is probably just ensuring that anything to do with reform is acknowledging that we have these additional 40 million people who like to come and see us every year, some of whom commit crime. But it was just really to ask whether the Chief Constable had anything to add on that,
Well,
although this will be more of a topic for next week.
It will be. I wait, as do all my Chief Constable colleagues, with anticipation the publication of the white paper. I'm obviously cognizant that when I first moved to this region 20 years ago, there was moves to reduce the number of police forces, which never happened. What I would say as a policing professional is it's not for me to decide the structure of policing in this country. It's for the elected government of the day, and no matter what determination that is, and I'm sure all the officers and staff of North Yorkshire Police will continue to do our very best to keep the public safe in whatever structures the government of the day might decide that we should have in the future. It is really important to me personally about that balance between rural and urban policing, and coming as someone who has spent the majority of my career policing very busy metropolitan areas. I do know implicitly the demands of policing big cities. It is really important that whatever structure of policing follows in the future, and I genuinely do not know what that is going to be, that our rural communities are protected, because 2 years in North Yorkshire Police, having got out around the entire county, spoken to many people from all sorts of different backgrounds, the sparsity of this county, 3,500 square miles, and the isolation of some of our communities is in itself a vulnerability. And any police service has to be able to take account of vulnerability in terms of the deployment of its resources. So I wait and see what is published. I openly acknowledge, I think if you were starting from a blank sheet of paper today, you probably wouldn't organise policing with 43 police forces across the county. But that's where we are today. And it is really important to me personally about making sure that our rural communities are protected. And whatever role I play in terms of influencing the future, that is something that I will be strongly advocating for. So I probably won't say any more on it at the moment because, as I say, it's not for me to dictate government policy. I'll wait and see what's published next week and try and understand it properly, and then we can start to make some sense of it for what it means for us here in North Yorkshire.
Yep. And I also think whatever does happen is not going to happen quickly. But equally, I think making sure that the public in York and North Yorkshire, who are the people obviously at the forefront of my mind, are not shortchanged by any changes and still get their fair representation in terms of police officers and policing, because ultimately it's their council tax and their income tax that is paying for that police force, and they deserve a service in response for that, which I would be concerned about if we were part of a much bigger metropolitan force. But we will see what happens next week. Just a quick question about the use of AI in North Yorkshire Police, just an assurance question really about how it's used within North Yorkshire in light of the kind of issues that happened in the West Midlands, but just more generally, just how we are using it and how and what guidance officers are given around the use of AI.
Yeah, I mean, I won't come to the West Midlands because that's the subject of an IOPC inquiry now, so it wouldn't be appropriate to do. We do use Microsoft Copilot. It is available on our systems, and there's a number of us, myself included, that have access to the full Microsoft Copilot. Very useful in terms of summarising documents and trying to understand the vast amount of information that comes across our desks on a day-by-day basis. Let me just say, since the events of last week, we've been really clear is that if people are using products like Microsoft Copilot, and to be fair, some of the Google modules that have an AI element to them now, to undertake open source intelligence, which obviously we do for a whole variety of reasons, because often you can pick up community sentiment, you can pick up lots and lots of information that's pertinent to how you deploy resources. But it's always got to be quality assured, and it's always got to have a human element that says, if I'm going to use that as intelligence, what is the provenance of it? And that's an incredibly important part of when you are deploying police resources, everything from thinking, where am I going to stick my neighbourhood police officers next week, right through to, am I going to deploy armed police officers against a particular individual? Every single piece of intelligence, you ask the question about what is the provenance of that information? How do I know it to be true? And then you make an assessment of the validity of that information. So we've reinforced that guidance to all our staff working in intelligence. We will continue to try and develop use of AI because it's a really important technological advance. I want to see, the vast amount, that we undertake vast amounts of administration in policing because we have all sorts of information, and that involves an awful lot of people and an awful lot of cost. And just like every other efficiency, it's important that we look at how technology could do that. But it's really important that we do that within a properly constructed framework, that we think about the ethical elements of it. So we're going on a journey with this, but it's step by step. And we will continue to pause and assess at every stage and invite scrutiny at every stage. But I think just in terms of the issues that arose, there is an awful lot. Do we use Microsoft Copilot? Of course we do. I'm surprised many organisations that don't. We use Microsoft Copilot. We use Google. We use the full suite of Microsoft products in the running of the organisation. I think that's probably all I can say on this at the moment.
That's fine. Thank you. That's fine. And my final thing was more of a local spotlight thing to pick up, because we're in budget season, and the Mayor and I have been having extensive conversations about delivery on our priorities, just really about road safety and how what the plans are from North Yorkshire Police to tackle or improve road safety in the region, and whether or not it might be possible, because I know that there is a real lag with our road safety data regionally in terms of the deaths and serious injury numbers for understandable reasons, but just whether there's a way for the Mayor and I to monitor road safety responses, perhaps from North Yorkshire Police, more accurately or in more real time than we can the deaths and serious injury numbers, which I know are understandably much longer in their time, the time frame in which we can get that information. So just plans around road safety and tackling and improving road safety, but also just how North Yorkshire Police respond, how many responses you're doing to road traffic accidents, and whether we could have access to that data more publicly.
Well, certainly we will be able to provide you with data to the number of RTCs that we go to. I'll just give you an example. So in 2024, we had 8,866 RTCs, the majority of which were damage only, obviously, but we had 1,757 that involved injury of some description. Some of that's not serious injury, touch of whiplash, but right up to people being killed on the road. So damage only incidents, we attended just over 40%. Those involving injury, right up to including fatalities, we attended 81% of those. Figures are broadly consistent this year. We attended 38% of damage only, 79.7% of those involving injuries. But the overall total in 2024 was 8,866. 2025 it was 9,187. So we have
9,527.
9,187. But I will let you have the full breakdown of those figures through my office. This is an issue. There are too many people injured on the roads of this county, and there are too many people who are killed on the roads of this county. One of the issues that I remain very concerned about, and I've expressed this in public before, is I find it utterly amazing that North Yorkshire is one of the only counties in this country that does not have a fixed speed camera network, because one of the significant causes of this is excessive speed. It's not the only cause, I'll grant you that, and we have particular issues. We know we have particular issues, particularly with motorbikes, particularly in the Dales, but excessive speed is one of the primary causes of collisions on the road. We know that. That's not unique to North Yorkshire. It is a well-known fact. We have 3,341 square miles. West Yorkshire Police, West Yorkshire area has 783 square miles. West Yorkshire has 452 fixed camera sites and 6 vans. We have 11 vans and 2 motorbikes and no fixed cameras. I think that is an untenable position. It is an untenable position. And what I really want to do through the Road Safety Partnership is to change that position. It is an untenable position going forward. And this is not about catching motorists out. This is not about cash cows. This is about saving lives. And anyone who disagrees with that, I'd suggest that, all you have to do is speak to someone who's lost a loved one through excessive speed on the road. It's not about, but it's about making sure that our arterial routes particularly are covered with fixed and average speed cameras. Everyone knows they're there. Everyone knows that they're there, but we need to invest in that network. And certainly some of our, areas in some of our villages would benefit from some of that, and that would then leave us with the vans. There's probably a smaller number of vans to go and target the issues that are of public concern and to move around. But I just find it staggering that other counties have been investing in this for 20 years. So that, for me, through the Road Safety Partnership, and there's more to be done in terms of education, particularly around motorcycles. There's more to be done in terms of continuing the work that we do in schools around this. There's more to be done in terms of road design, where you're having RTCs in local areas, but it's a partnership exercise. They would be my thoughts for the road safety partnership going forward. But that issue around fixed speed cameras is a real one.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And look, the mayor and I are determined to do something about it in terms of both the combined authorities approach through the transport fund to the capital costs that sit behind some of this, but also just ensuring that the partnership itself is able to continue, because the funding for the partnership was on a bit of a shoestring from some legacy money from a few years ago, and we just want to make sure it's on a permanent footing for the future, in order that we can really grip this, because all of these people, every single one of these killed and serious injuries, or just the anyone who's injured on our roads, those are absolutely terrible incidents for those families and those individuals. And they're also terrible incidents for blue light services who have to respond. And so therefore, I think anything that we can do, and you're right, we have to do this in partnership. I met with the two executive members and cabinet members for the two local authorities this week, I think it was this week, possibly last week, about the road safety partnership and the work that we can do together. There is real investment there. I think we just need to grasp this now, make that road safety partnership something where we are really moving it forwards and focused on how we serve the public in that space, because at the moment, you're absolutely right, the public are being ill-served by a very poor infrastructure, particularly around speed, but also just in terms of that wider approach to our roads and the safety of them. That's good to know, and I know that we're looking at budgets next week and in the coming weeks. So that just wanted to have put that on the record on road safety, both from David Scaife, the mayor, and I, but also because of North Yorkshire Police's role in that road safety partnership, and actually segueing very naturally into the third party report section, because ACC Moseley chairs the road safety partnership currently. So I don't know whether before we move into the inspection section, you wanted to say anything further on top of what the chief has just said.
I agree with all of the points that have been discussed. The academic review that we commissioned from the road safety partnership to Newcastle University has come back with a clear evidence base that a mixed economy in terms of enforcement, both from static cameras, so fixed and average cameras, and also mobile cameras, we would see advantages from. It's a strong model. So it's absolutely my intention as the road safety partnership chair to support that plan going forward. So that work is very much in progress.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll carry on that work and those discussions, I'm sure, outside of this public setting. But it's good to put it on the record publicly as well. We can move on, I think, to the final set of slides, and then we've got some public questions to pick up. So we're on to the HMIC update, which I'm assuming is going to be relatively brief, given that they've just been in, but we haven't got the report.
Exactly that. I mean, I'll update us on both our most recent Peel inspection and then some other thematic inspections and super complaints, but I think we can move through this fairly swiftly. Just to come to the first slide then, so probably the main point here is from our previous Peel inspection, that was in 2023, there were 11 areas for improvement reported in that report. 10 of those have already been closed, where essentially we submit evidence back to the inspectorate and they then close down the recommendation. That leaves one, which was focused, as it says, on improving outcomes for victims. That was an unusual one in the sense that all inspected forces were given that area for improvement. And up until relatively recently, the inspectorate weren't closing them. In brief summary, we've led a very comprehensive milestone plan over the course of the last year to bring together a host of activities to improve our performance in delivering outcomes for victims in order to close that AFI. So to give some examples of what we've done, we've become a pilot force for the College of Policing, a course designed to improve the supervision of investigations and the oversight of victim care. We've delivered additional internal training to supervisors through a programme we call Operation Crystal, and that touches on victim and witness care and support. And as the Chief mentioned earlier on, we're undertaking a volume crime review to raise our compliance with our internal crime allocation policy, so that crimes that are complex or pose particular risk to vulnerable victims are routed to the right investigator with the right skill set. So on the basis of that milestone plan, we've submitted a closure request for that specific area for improvement. We're probably one of the first forces to do so, actually. So that's a positive position. And then touching on some of the others noted on this slide here. So from the other reports, we have 2 remaining areas for improvement from our integrity inspection and 4 from our previous custody inspection in 2022. I'll come back to those later. The national thematic reports, they refer to recommendations from national reports that are sent to all forces, essentially. We've seen a slight increase in the number of outstanding areas for improvement in this category, and that's as a result of our adoption of 6 new recommendations from national reports into crime investigation standards and organised immigration crime, both of which we have milestone plans against now to progress activity. And then the final category is the number of open recommendations from the relatively new super complaint category. That's reduced by 5 since the last reporting period. But all of the progress there, all of the work against the areas for improvement, they're reported through our internal governance, ultimately to our risk and assurance board. So there's a very tight grip and governance and leadership over all of our recommendations management, if that makes sense.
It
I think
does.
we could probably move to the next slide. Thanks, Leila.
Yeah, thank you.
So, as you said, Deputy Mayor, our most recent peel inspection was concluded in November. Now, HMI started some of that field work in April and completed that field work in November, but that was a very comprehensive inspection that involved interviews with leaders, the running of focus groups with staff, observing numerous governance meetings, visits to stations, reviewing crime files and calls for service. It's a very significant piece of work. So we had a verbal hot debrief in December with some initial findings, and the idea of the hot debrief isn't that it's shared publicly, but it gives the force the opportunity to start to focus on areas that may be reported on in the written report that's to be published subsequently. We anticipate that draft report will be with us in February, and again that draft isn't shared publicly at that stage, but it's provided to the force to enable any factual inaccuracies to be identified. And then the final public report will be published in March. It's important to just reference that the question set in this peel report, the most recent peel report, has changed from the previous one. So the content of the specific questions, what we call the characteristics of good, has changed, but it also now includes the custody inspection, which used to be the subject of a completely separate inspection series that was ungraded. So that's now brought into the peel inspection series. And then just briefly touching on some of the other recent inspection activity, we have just taken part in the National Thematic Inspection on Cybersecurity. And to pick off a few of the elements that was looking at, it was looking at how we protect our information systems, how we detect cybersecurity events, and more broadly understand and manage information security risks in force. Those inspections aren't graded, but they form part of a single national thematic report once it's produced, so we'll await the publication of that.
And when is that expected?
That's the summer that's scheduled for, but no specific date has been provided so far.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Leila. So I think we may have
jumped.
skipped one lately. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so let me just touch on our serious and organised crime report, which has now been published. The field work for this report was completed in the autumn of 2024, and we received the published report just prior to Christmas. As it says there, we were awarded a grade of adequate. So that means there were some characteristics of good that I just mentioned in terms of the performance set, but there were some areas where potential improvement was identified by the inspectorate. And just to pick on those and pick those out and discuss them. So the first was that we should look at how we can improve access to data sets relevant to serious and organised crime from partners. That's about, in summary, making sure we've got all of the means through information sharing agreements to legitimately seek partnership data on SOC, serious and organised crime, in developing our local profile so that partners can support us in providing that data. Now, we do have information sharing agreements with all of the key partners that you'd expect. We just need to make sure they're up to date and clear so that partners understand what data they can share and support us in our tackling of serious and organised crime. And the second was around our management of serious and organised crime offenders, effectively those who are served with a serious crime prevention order. Now, there are 7 people in York and North Yorkshire presently who have a serious crime prevention order. They are post-conviction orders issued in the criminal courts. 5 of them are currently locked up, and that leaves 2 who aren't in prison. We manage those individuals through our dedicated serious and organised crime team called Sentry, alongside an expert offender manager. And some forces, integrated offender management teams wholly manage those individuals. And the inspectorate has raised that we should consider that model, albeit they did point out that it's too early to see whether or not our approach of the way we manage them in our Sentry teams is effective. So that's the second point for us to consider. But, you know, in brief, they did report a number of elements of considerable positive feedback. We have a dedicated chief inspector in serious and organised crime who coordinates the force approach. We didn't have that previously. They reported on how we've assembled specialist resources to tackle serious and organised crime through our dedicated Sentry teams, and the product of what they do is clear. They've acknowledged how we've embedded local responsibility for overseeing plans to tackle serious and organised crime. We call our 4P plans through our neighbourhood teams. And they also talk really positively about our very visible leadership approach with Operation Tornado that the chief mentioned on earlier, that very often has a serious and organised crime link. So in terms of the overall findings, we have a very comprehensive milestone plan now. We're progressing against those areas of improvement and other informal observations in the report, which I think we'll be able to conclude in a relatively short space of time.
Great.
Okay.
I guess my only question just on that was, is it possible that the way in which North Yorkshire is undergoing this work is slightly different to other forces just because our volumes are different?
I mean, that's a very valid observation. The number of perpetrators with a serious crime prevention order is clearly much lower than it would be in other forces. You know, we consider the approach we've taken with our dedicated Sentry teams, which not all forces will have any dedicated capability to deal with serious and organised crime. We are lucky in the sense that we've invested heavily in that. We think we see the benefits of that. It's clear to us. So we are managing those serious crime prevention orders in part through our resource in our dedicated Sentry teams, with a offender management capability alongside it. So you know, we absolutely see that, you know, the approach that other forces have taken. We'll obviously, you know, be able to understand the benefits of our approach in time, and obviously consider the next steps that the inspectorate have you know, suggested to us.
Great, thank you.
And then I think the next slide touches on the previous integrity inspection. Again, I'll just pick off a couple of bits here. So again, this is being tracked through a milestone plan, and there are a couple of updates to highlight that have changed since the previous reporting period. The first relates to the first area for improvement, reference number 1. That's on how we use organisation-wide learning established through local PSD investigations. That learning is now recorded centrally. It's taken to an organisational learning board, which we've introduced to share and understand how we embed that learning across the organisation in our process and procedure. We expect that area for improvement to be submitted for closure in April. And the second update relates to how we use intelligence gained through counter-corruption activity. As the update says, we've developed a strategic threat and risk assessment implementation plan, under which, on a practical basis, we're conducting proactive monitoring of business interests and creating an integrity passport. Again, we expect the updates on the area for improvement to be ready for closure in July. So, you know, a positive step in terms of the progress against that inspection.
Great.
And then lastly, on the final slide, thanks, Layla, it's just a long list of updated future thematic inspections and rolling programmes. Just to pick off a couple of points here. So the first 2 black bullet points on the left, so there's a list of inspections there. Many of those, A, we don't know if North Yorkshire has been selected yet to take part in those, and B, if they have been, when they will be. What we can say is that we're not part of the firearms licensing inspection. We weren't selected for that. As well as police leadership, and their thematic reports, they'll report in the summer, but we didn't take part in those. The others, we're waiting to see if there's a requirement for our involvement. And then just to pick off a couple of points in the last bullet point. So those are further reports that have been commissioned by the inspectorate throughout 25 to 29. Again, we don't yet know if we're going to be part of those. You'll see a clear theme playing out with, you know, a number of those points. There's a theme in terms of preparedness, so preparedness around our strategic policing requirement, counter-terrorism, JESUP to deal with critical and major incidents, as well as some science and technology themes, and also investigative ones based on knife crime and retail crime. So probably 3 key themes in those playing out for the next inspection series between 25 and 29. I think that's it for the slides, so I'll pause there for any questions.
I don't think I have got any questions on this, exceptionally, partly because I think I'm sitting very much in a wait till the next one space. Unless anyone else has anything to add, I think we can probably move on to the public questions, if that's okay, which I'm hoping are about to appear. I think we've got 3, although they're all on the same theme, so we might just group them together. Rebecca, if you're able to move the question. Right, so we've got the first question is about speed cameras, which actually, interestingly, for Andy and Ullerskelf, we've already touched on, but it's a question about the use of the camera vans in open rural areas, away from residential areas, rather than villages with issues, who might have issues with speeds in their 30-mile-an-hour zones. I don't know who wants to come in. Actually, can we just take the other one? I think there's another one from Bob, also on speed cameras. Why don't we have more ANPR speed cameras? They've got a 20-mile-an-hour limit where Bob lives in York, but it's not enforced. I know that the Road Safety Partnership has talked about enforcement of 20s because it's a big issue in the City of York. Speed cameras would deter speeding, but could also deter illegal right turns. That may not be as straightforward. And that he's unhappy with people getting away with breaking the law. I just wonder who can come in just on the camera points, those 2 camera points.
I'll come in and I say what I say in light of my comments earlier on in the meeting, but I fully accept the member of the public's perception. The reality is that we do deploy camera vans in villages. Basically, the camera vans are deployed on the basis of 1 or 2 methods. 1 on basis of collision data over the last 3 years, or 2 in response to a community concern. If you look at our data, and we obviously record in some detail where we deploy these cameras, so we can measure the effectiveness of them. Across 2025, we have deployed most often to 60-mile-an-hour zones, spent 43 of our total deployment time within 60-mile-an-hour zones, but on average, about 55% of serious and fatal collisions occur on 60-mile-an-hour roads. So it follows that we would spend more time there. But 30-mile-an-hour zones accounted for 25% of our total time in 2025. And that accounts for about 32% of serious and fatal collisions across the last 3 years. So we continue to monitor that. As I say, it's a blend of looking at collision data and continue to update it. But we do take community concerns really seriously. And as I drive around the county, and you drive through some of our rural villages, and you've got narrow footways, and you've got people negotiating those pavements, it is really important that the speed limits are enforced there. Just moving on to the second point around the 20-mile-an-hour zones. I mean, a lot of the 20-mile-an-hour zones present challenges just because of the nature of the geography there. I would much prefer that we deal with 20-mile-an-hour zones with traffic calming measures, road design that naturally slows the traffic down, because it's very difficult to deploy a camera van there. But also our neighbourhood teams and our roads policing officers do sometimes deploy handheld devices. All of this, though, as I say, in my opinion, need to rethink, because it needs to be a series of mobile cameras deployed in and amongst a fixed camera network. Everyone will know that they're there. It's not a question of, oh, the van's there today, the van's not there today, have I forgotten about it? If you've got fixed cameras, they're very visible, everybody knows they're there, and that will have an impact in terms of slowing people down. And it's that will make sure that we maximise our ability to protect people's lives on the road.
Thanks. ACC Mosley, do you want to add anything to that?
Just to underscore the chief's point, we've been really clear. In the meantime, we will be evidence-based in our approach. So first and foremost, that's based on existing serious collision data. We use that to inform where we are positioning our mobile safety vans. That's first and foremost. That's really important. We obviously allow the public to raise their concerns. That's particularly important for an emerging concern that we might not have been aware of, to be able to manage that enforcement wise, and also consider that through the road safety partnership in terms of engineering solutions for the local authorities. But the key message is there. We are evidence based in our citing of any enforcement approach.
Thank you. And the only thing I would add to Andy and Bob's question is that this is absolutely about a partnership. I appreciate that for the local authorities, much as they might want to implement additional engineering changes, they may not have the budget to do that. And so this has to be about a partnership that if we can, through the combined authority, we're able to provide some additional support. Also, certainly in some of our rural areas, some of those villages don't have any footpaths at all. And so actually people are navigating roads, often with children, but without any access to proper footpaths. And certainly in terms of the Mayor's active travel mission around encouraging people to walk or cycle when they can for short distances, if there's no proper footpath, that is going to be incredibly difficult. Also, just to underline particularly around the chief's point around community concerns, I've held dozens now of surgery appointments, particularly with parish councils, are mainly focused on road safety, community concerns around road safety. So if there are areas like Ulleskelf, I don't think I have met with Ulleskelf, although I may have done, and they want to raise that with me specifically because there is a particular community concern, they're very happy to take that on. So Andy should get in touch with me to make that appointment. And certainly for Bob, around the 20-mile-an-hour zones, again, that was something I talked to the executive member for transport in York about either this week or last week, I now can't remember what day it was, about whether or not there can be any work around the 20-mile-an-hour zones. That I know is an issue for the city because they want to expand their 20s, but officers in the council are reluctant to do it without any reassurance around enforcements. So there is a balance there in terms of that discussion, which I know that the Road Safety Partnership will look at. Can we just put up Alex's question, because it's also a road safety question, but it's over in Skipton, which is a concern about antisocial driving around Skipton, speeding. I don't know what popping exhausts is. Is that some kind of like thing that people do to their cars? Running red lights, that's obviously dangerous driving, and pedestrian crossings being ignored, and a request for safety cameras to be used, which may just be something that can be picked up as a community concern, rather than me having to have a separate appointment about it.
Yeah, I mean, we can pick that up. I mean, to me, it sounds a bit more like that's a job for the neighbourhood policing team up there. It's not necessarily an issue of just parking a camera van around. So we will take that question and pass it to the neighbourhood policing team as a local concern and ask them to do. But one thing I will make a point just whilst I'm in a public meeting is if the public see such road driving behaviour, we do have Operation Snap. It is they can, and we can circulate perhaps through your office, Deputy Mayor, the contact details for Operation Snap. If you have dash cam footage of people driving in this antisocial manner, please forward it to us and we will take action.
Great, thank you. Thank you to Alec, Andy and Bob for your questions. People can ask questions at any time. You don't have to wait for an online public meeting. There are contact details to contact us at any point. If you've got queries for either North Yorkshire Police or for the Fire and Rescue Service, you can raise them through my office or with me directly. Either if it's a personal complaint relating to you, that might be a surgery appointment, but if it is a more general point, we're happy to raise them generally into both services. So I think that is the end of the meeting. Thank you to everyone who has presented and to the contributors for their questions. The next public meeting will be on the 26th of February with the Fire and Rescue Service, focused on building stronger communities in North Yorkshire. And our next meeting with North Yorkshire Police will be on the 19th of March. Thank you for watching on a Friday afternoon. I'm sure no one's watching on a Friday afternoon on the 23rd of January. But if you are, thank you for watching. It will be available to watch afterwards. These meetings stay online permanently, so people can watch them at any point. But thank you to everyone for their questions, and to the Chief Constable and ACC Moseley for their comprehensive answers, and to the Chief Inspector David Hunter for his presentation as well. Thank you. Have a good weekend, everyone.